A new theory tonight in the University of Idaho homicides, and it may provide new insight into Bryan Kohberger's mindset and possible motive.
TAs and the professors listed in many different places, and his name didn't appear anywhere.
Kohlberger, who was arrested in December and charged with the deaths of 4 students, may have come across his alleged victims at a much earlier date than first thought.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Oh my gosh, you guys. How long was Bryan watching these women at the 1122 King Road house? As I showed you, when Bryan Inton did that drive-by, there is a parking lot located behind the 1122 King Road house. This parking lot belongs to the apartment complex, those 2 apartment buildings that I've shown you in prior videos. So anyone could have slid into them. Was Bryan parking in the apartment parking lot and literally looking in the windows of the 1122 King Road house? It turns out, according to News Nation, that law enforcement is investigating Bryan Kohberger in relation to other cases open in the state of Pennsylvania. According to Mark Garagos, defense attorney, this is common practice. Law enforcement is looking to see if Bryan Kohberger did this before or if this was his first time. Now, Bryan Kohberger is only 28 years old, so it would not surprise me if what happened to the Idaho 4 students was his very first time. However, it is possible that he did this before. So this is not uncommon for law enforcement to do this. And they may not just be looking for other cases where Bryan has done away with someone. They may also be looking to see if Bryan has a history of stalking other people, if he has a history of being creepy, if he has a history of peeping, being a peeping Tom or voyeur on someone. So this is very normal. They're going to want to establish a pattern of behavior to help them to make their case for the Idaho 4 students, Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. Former FBI agent Jennifer Koffendorfer weighed in. Let's listen.
Well, specifically, if they have a case that fits the modus operandi, which is just fancy words for the way of doing something that matches what happened in Idaho, for instance, is the target a young, beautiful co-ed? Was the weapon of choice a knife? Was the arrival and departure of the individual in a vehicle as opposed to being dropped off or by foot? Was the time chosen at this 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock time frame? How about the surveillance, geo-tracking, if you will, that would have been done of the phones? Did something like that occur at this location, at a location they're looking at, to show this time frame? And then finally, is there any surveillance or witness account of somebody being dressed like Bryan Kohberger dressed?
So if they can find evidence that Bryan Kohberger dressed all in black, similar to the clothing that they found that was mentioned in the affidavit, they mentioned a black ski mask, they mentioned black gloves. They have an eyewitness, which is Dylan, that saw him in with bushy eyebrows. If they can find anything that meets that type of description, again, it would show a pattern of behavior in this case, and it will help law enforcement get their conviction against Bryan Kohberger. I did a poll with you guys during my live stream, and you guys overwhelmingly believed that Bryan had also entered the house at 1122 King Road, and I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more in just a second. Law enforcement's going to look to see if there are any similarities. Is this, as Chris Cuomo said, a quote signature type of crime in this case? Let's listen in to Jennifer Koffendorfer.
I think it is a signature type crime. I mean, this is a vicious crime with a K-bar knife. It's unusual. It was a co-ed on campus. So if they're looking at something very specific that's unsolved with these parameters, they're probably looking in the right direction.
We're going to talk about some more about Bryan in just a second, so please stay with me. Everything I'm sharing with you today is my opinion, and opinions are not facts, so please don't send any negativity to anyone. Let's be kind and good to each other. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up so I know you were here. Chris Cuomo also asked defense attorney Mark Geragos about how the prosecution would go about linking Bryan Kohberger to the victims, to Kaylee, to Maddie, because we believe it was one of those two that was probably the target, or possibly Xana and Ethan. And the reason we don't think it was Xana or Ethan is because he would have had to have gone up another flight of stairs to get to Kaylee and Maddie. Is there any reason that Bryan Kohberger would be following these girls on social media and or sliding into their DMs? Let's listen to what Mark Geragos has to say on this topic.
I think the first thing that the defense has done, I guarantee you they've already taken a deep dive into the social media. That's one of the first things you do. Besides running background checks, that's one of the other tasks that you give your people to do in a defense is I want everything on social media. I want a deep dive. Right. I want you to scrub it and tell me what's there. Now, if there's a connection, then that's going to be something you're going to have to plumb and deal with. You know, there was also reported early on that there may have been in the search at his apartment or location some other indicia or connection to the victims of this. And if that is the case, you're going to focus like a laser on that, because that is something that is going to be front and center in any prosecutorial presentation of evidence.
Now, we have learned that Bryan Kohberger was following two of the victims on Instagram. He was reportedly sending DMs to one of the two victims, and that would presumably be whoever his target was. And I think it's very interesting that law enforcement is looking to try to connect him to additional cases. I thought that they probably would do that. If you've watched some of my other videos on Bryan Kohberger, we've discussed this. Just because Bryan Kohberger may not have committed something like what he did to Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie, and I'm watching my words here, doesn't mean that he didn't have stalking or peeping Tom voyeur type of behaviors in his past. And I think it will only help to strengthen the prosecution's case against Bryan Kohberger if they can show a pattern of behavior and if they can connect Bryan Kohberger to these victims. I did a poll with you guys during my live stream, and you guys overwhelmingly believed that Bryan had also entered the house at 1122 King Road. So I'm very interested to read what your comments are in the comment section below. Do you believe it's possible that Bryan chose to go to Washington State University and live in Pullman, Washington? Now, Pullman is just 15 minutes down the road from 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. Is this why he chose to live in Pullman? Let me know what you think. Subscribe.